I used to think that prison was just a place where people serve their time. But then I found out that private prisons are a literal business. They make their money locking up as many people as possible. Yo, the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as it was designed, for profit. Imagine a hotel chain, but instead of guests, they get paid per prisoner, per day. That's how private prisons operate. More prisoners equals more money. Do they want fewer people in jail? Hell no. Companies like CoreCivic and GEO Group, they make billions from keeping prisons full. They don't just benefit from mass incarceration. They lobby for policies to keep it going. Just an example, since the 1980s, private prisons have spent over $150 million just lobbying for tougher laws. Because a full prison is a profitable prison. Public prisons are bad, don't get me wrong, but private ones? Straight up hellholes. Private prisons cut corners because every penny saved is a profit. Less food, fewer guards, worse healthcare. But shareholders stay happy. A fucking shareholder for a prison. Prisoners in private facilities are more likely to be assaulted, denied medical care, and kept longer for bad behavior. Why? Because every extra day means extra money. They lobby for longer sentences, harsher drug laws, and more immigrant detention centers. They profit from cheap prison labor, aka modern-day slavery. They push for tough on crime policies, even when crime rates are down. Because again, empty beds equals no money. States with private prisons have higher incarceration rates because they literally have contracts requiring 90% occupancy. 90% occupancy. So who gets locked up the most? Just take a wild guess. Private prisons don't just target criminals. They target communities. Black Americans are 13% of the U.S. population, but 38% of the prison population. ICE detention centers, 70% are run by private prisons. That means they're making money off of mass incarcerations and immigrant policies, aka human trafficking with extra steps.
Well, here we are again at the for-profit private detention facility. These places rely heavily on occupancy quotas. Typically, they need to maintain an occupancy of 90% or more to guarantee revenue. So overcrowding and high incarceration rates ensure profitability. The two largest private prison companies, GEO Group and CoreCivic, have brought in billions and billions of dollars in recent years. And because they're run like a business, the goal is to keep overhead costs low. So they naturally reduce expenditures on essential services like those that rehabilitate, and these companies spend millions on lobbying. GEO Group in 1 year spent close to $1.7 million. They lobby for harsher laws that promote incarceration. They profit from agreements with ICE. And the financial benefits to these companies are so clear that sometimes the legislature responds by trying to pass legislation like the 2016 Ending Tax Breaks for Private Prisons Act. Anyway, it's readily apparent how a lot of this is about money. So if you think that prison in our criminal legal system is all about punishment and incapacitation and rehabilitation, the numbers behind this country's prison industrial complex unfortunately tell a far different story.
Private prisons in America were designed not as a solution to crime, but as a profit engine, and the human cost is staggering. From their inception in the 1980s, these facilities have exploited mass incarceration, targeting low-income communities and people of color disproportionately. Corporations running these prisons are paid per prisoner, creating a perverse incentive to fill beds regardless of crime severity. Minor infractions, nonviolent offenses, or even pretrial detentions become revenue streams. Lobbying by these companies has influenced legislation, inflating sentences, criminalizing poverty, and perpetuating systemic racism. The result is a vicious cycle: families torn apart, communities destabilized, and a criminal justice system more interested in profit than justice. Taxpayer dollars that should support education, healthcare, and social services instead line the pockets of CEOs and shareholders. The insidiousness of private prisons goes deeper than the obvious financial exploitation. They thrive on cutting costs, underpaying staff, and skimping on rehabilitation programs, creating environments ripe for abuse, neglect, and violence. Many Americans are unaware that lobbying efforts from these corporations helped craft laws that essentially manufacture crime: drug sentencing guidelines, Three strikes policies and harsh probation violations all feed their profit model. The system profits from incarceration itself rather than public safety, turning human lives into commodities. Meanwhile, communities of color bear the heaviest burden, with generations trapped in cycles of poverty and imprisonment, their potential stolen for the enrichment of a few. Private prisons are not a neutral part of the justice system. They are a predatory industry, a moral blight, and a stark illustration of how capitalism can weaponize human suffering for wealth.
It's always amazing to me that private prisons are still a thing in the US and that they're allowed. It's basically slavery just in a different form. Imagine you build a prison, now you own it, and now you have 3,000 to 4,000 inmates, and guess how much you get to pay them an hour? $1.15. That's on the high side. The average is like 63 cents. But for real, I mean, I had a father that was in prison. He was making, I think it was like 34 or 43 cents an hour, and that was Attica. An hour. You got prisoners working 40-hour work weeks, and they take home is $17.20. And you be wondering why people have to put money on the books? This is why. They work 40 hours doing hard labor, and they made $17. That shouldn't be allowed, should it? There's companies that invest to have their stuff be made in American prisons. So like certain things that said, oh, made in America. Like, no. It was made by prisoners in America. That private prisons can make between $30 to $200 per inmate. Per inmate. Imagine you have 4,000 inmates, times that by 100, making $400,000 a day. Just for owning a space that incarcerates people and you have literally no upkeep. Imagine just being like, oh yeah, Jay, I don't really care if you clean this. Yeah, we're gonna put up a cot right here. Electricity's out. Too bad. We don't need Wi-Fi. Any company involved should just literally have to say on their package, we hire prisoners for less than 50 cents an hour, if you're wondering. In the public prisons, they don't pay much better. And it's like, all that money off top, where's that going? And you're gonna tell me back to the state and back to the country? It's not. I'm not an idiot. It's called private slavery. Absolutely iniquitous. Now you know.
The private prison makes its money either way. Let me explain. First thing to understand about the private prison business is that they're actually government contractors. They enter into a contract. Now, in that contract, they talk about a bunch of different things, but one of those things is price. Let's say it costs $100 a day to house an inmate. Well, naturally, any for-profit company is going to add a little bit of buffer in there so that way they can make a profit. So the private prison may charge the government $125, $150 per day per inmate, for example. Now that's price. But another thing that might be in that contract is a thing called bed guarantees. This is where the government guarantees the prison that at least 90% of those beds will always be occupied for the duration of the contract. Yeah, the government guarantees it. In a contract. Which might leave you wondering, how can the government be so sure that that many people will commit crimes? And the better question, what happens if they don't? Want to know what would happen if we all obeyed the law? The government would have to pay a fee to the private prison. That's right. Yeah, it's in the contract. For every empty bed that is not filled, for every law-abiding citizen that stays on the straight and narrow, the government is punished by having to pay a fee. And that's when you realize citizens are punished when they do commit crimes. The state governments are punished if they don't.
The existence of private prisons relies on a constant flow of inmates, making it clear that neither these corporations nor, by extension, the government has a genuine interest in reducing incarceration. Policies are designed around maximizing occupancy, not public safety. The system discourages reforms that would decrease the prison population, such as decriminalizing minor infractions or expanding diversion programs. Research shows that states with more privatized facilities often have higher incarceration rates, even when crime is falling, proving that the goal is not crime reduction, but bed occupancy. Without prisoners, the private prison model collapses, revealing that the system thrives on punishment over prevention, profit over justice. If petty crimes were treated less harshly, the societal impact would be transformative. Decriminalization of minor offenses like loitering, low-level drug possession, or unpaid fines could drastically reduce jail populations, freeing resources for community services, education, and mental health programs. Studies indicate that harsh sentencing for minor offenses has minimal effect on public safety, but creates lifelong consequences for individuals: job loss, disenfranchisement, and social instability, feeding cycles of poverty and crime. Removing the financial incentive to incarcerate would force governments to rethink justice, emphasizing rehabilitation and prevention. Society would gain healthier, more productive communities, and the idea of punishment as a default solution would give way to addressing root causes of crime, revealing a justice system built for humans, not for profit.
I've worked at CoreCivic for 32 years, and this is truly one of the most exciting periods in my career with the company. Having just wrapped up a strong 2024, we're anticipating significant growth opportunities, perhaps the most significant growth in our company's history over the next several years. We believe CoreCivic is exceptionally well-positioned operationally and financially to meet what we expect to be a sharp acceleration demand from our partners, particularly our key federal partners, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and the United States Marshal Service.
Just to be clear, in case there's any confusion, CoreCivic is a private prison company. It's correct. They make money off of incarcerating people. Now, when their CEO, Damon T. Hornyfinger, or whatever his name was, said they're anticipating the most significant growth in their company's history, what that means is he's anticipating that they're going to get very rich off of throwing people in prison. And in this case, as he referenced, throwing immigrants in prison because of their federal partners, ICE. Now, call this a hot take all you want, but I just don't think that a for-profit prison model should exist. I don't think that there should be a financial incentive to put somebody in prison. That kind of perverts the justice system, in my opinion.
One of those reasons you've been in the news is because of CoreCivic, an investigation by our U.S. Department of Justice. CoreCivic has also paid out many, many fines. So why are we still allowing CoreCivic to be our main privately operated contractor for TDLC?
They have been a very good partner for the state. We have a very good relationship with the CoreCivic leadership.
I do have to disagree. They are not a good partner. They run trials still Turner with a 188% turnover rate. They are also chronically understaffed, still under federal investigation. How do we call that a good partner for our taxpayer dollars? None of our state-run prisons are under federal investigation.
I take real issue with CoreCivic being referred to as a good partner. Breached their contracts multiple times. We continue to get reports of deaths in their facilities, drugs infiltrating prison walls. What are they doing about it? Nothing. They're over there popping champagne corks for the last 2 weeks because they think their stocks are going up because of a new influx of a prison population. Under no circumstances have they proven to be a good partner of the state of Tennessee. This is crazy that we continue to shovel hundreds of millions of dollars into a private corporation that are failing to do the job they promised you they would do. And our taxpayers, they can be sued as a state actor. We have a duty to the people of this state to make sure our corrections department and facilities are run according to the law. They're under federal investigation for a reason. It's probably too late, in my opinion. But I would like to see this state and this department take some responsibility for those with whom it contracts.
CoreCivic, that's what that is. That's a CoreCivic prison back there. There's a lot of them all across the United States. And Tennessee alone, they are the worst prisons that we have. There's only one that ranks with it, and that's the Northwest. And right now it's Trialsdale. And this prison should have never been opened and definitely shouldn't be shut down. When they first opened this prison, you couldn't even lock the doors. And then after they could lock the doors, you can still to this day pop them from the outside. There is no such thing as a lockdown there. It's pretty bad. Numerous of people have died there, as well as staff members. And the problem that they have, just like so many other ones, is that they're understaffed. You may say, well, dang, why don't they just do something about the prison population? Because there's $80 billion a year spent on jails and prisons. That's why it's money, privately owned prisons. You think that the people that got into the business for privately owned prisons is because they want to help? It's because they want to make money. It's just like treatment centers and all these other things. People say, oh, well, they really want to help. No, they don't. They want to make money. I've never seen a treatment center that was doing it for the right thing, nor have I ever saw a prison that's doing it for the right thing. True story.
Why is CoreCivic above the law in Tennessee? Why have the pleas for help and intervention gone unanswered from countless families? Here are some of what we know by documented court records and lawsuits. In CoreCivic, understaffing is so low that it's enough to cancel the contract, but the contracts remain. In CoreCivic, the prison mortality rates are 3 to 4 times the national average most years, and the contracts remain. CoreCivic overdoses and overdose deaths from illegal contraband drugs proven to be brought in by staff, and the contracts remain. In CoreCivic, rehabilitative programs for years have been unattainable or unavailable altogether, and yet the contracts remain. And CoreCivic prison rapes are allowed by staff in some cases, knowing they happen, yet they refuse to fill out PREA paperwork, and yet the contracts remain. And CoreCivic violence is out of control. Inmates are wandering the prison unchecked at night, and the contracts remain. In CoreCivic, extortion to families of inmates made to pay or their loved ones are raped, beaten, or killed, and yet the contracts remain. The Department of Justice has an open federal investigation into sexual assaults, violence, and high death rates, and yet the contracts remain. Why are we, as a state, unwilling to hold the TDOC accountable for prisons contracted to their care in the state of Tennessee? They're failing families every day. Every single month that CoreCivic prisons are open in Tennessee, there are 5 to 6 families that lose their loved one to a CoreCivic prison. The state is failing to oversee CoreCivic with any level of competency. If the TDOC had a mascot, it would be an ostrich, because they spend all their time with their head in the sands when it comes to CoreCivic. It's time to cancel the contract.